Welcome to Intersections. I'm joined today by a young man who's going to have a very exciting couple of weeks. He's about to graduate from Memorial University of Newfoundland with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and History. I'm joined by Nick Hillier, who I've known since he was a little boy, and now he's growing into a very fine young man. Welcome, Nick. And with that little bit of background, can you tell me where life's going from here as far as the plan is concerned, recognizing plans are just that, plans, right? Mm-hmm. So what's next?
Well, if all goes according to plan, it's going to be finish up this degree in a couple of weeks, and then I'll be going back in September, getting my Bachelor of Education in intermediate secondary, and I'll be teaching high school come next fall.
Wow. On the substitute list, or are you going to get a permanent position right away?
To be seen.
To be seen.
To be seen.
That's right.
I'd hope for the latter, but
well,
you know,
you have
it
to
is
pay.
what it
You
is.
have to do penance first, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's now. Let's go back. Take us back to. I mean, we haven't got to take a long trip back. We just go back to maybe 10, 12 years when you were just finding your way through St. John's Citadel. Talk to us about the kinds of things you were involved in here up until the present time, and talk to us about the impact of St. John's Citadel on your spiritual development.
Well, I mean, I was born and raised here. I was dedicated the third, fourth Sunday that I was on this planet. And, you know, I grew up in this core from day one. I've been, you know, I've had that classic upbringing of someone who was here from a very young age, you know, started in the YP band, did the singing company thing. Even before the YP band, I was in the beginner band. Came up through as I aged through, you know, went from junior soldiers to corps cadets. After corps cadets, moving on, obviously becoming a senior soldier, taking my time moving it from the YP band into the senior band, brief time in the songsters, and after that, you know, I started up the adult beginner band here at the Citadel. I saw an opportunity for ministry there, and ultimately, here we are. I'm on the executive of the senior band. I've been involved in the senior band for 8 years, something that I've absolutely loved. I can't say every minute of, but you know that you know yourself. Banding has its ups and has its downs, and I wouldn't trade it for a thing. And coming up through the core, you know, I've had a lot of key mentors and people who have had that influence on me, and I look back at right from beginner band. My beginner band leaders were Leah Antle and Heidi Adams, two people who are still very involved in this core, and people who I've looked up to for quite some time. I mean, Heidi in her first week kind of started her interview the same way that I did, saying, you know, you kind of had that classic upbringing where you were in everything. There was a time when I was up here at the core 5 nights a week, and you know, whether it be Monday nights at corps cadets, it could have been Wednesday nights for band and songsters. Thursday night I had to do a stint with YP band, still helped out there. Friday nights, whether it be KFC, YFM, Young Adult Ministries.
Just for the benefit of those who don't know what those acronyms are.
Yeah, so KFC, Kids for Christ,
right.
So that would be ages up to 12. And then YFM is Youth Fellowship Ministries, that would be 12 to, I think it's 17 or 18, right up until you hit, you know, your final year of grade school. And then after that, it was Young Adult Ministries that I've been involved with ever since. Saturdays, I spent some time with our divisional youth band, Newfound Brass, and you were here Sunday morning. So right there, the only nights that I wasn't here was Tuesday nights.
And right now you've spoken a lot about program, mm-hmm. right? And programs, and that's a big piece of what happens as a young person growing up in the Salvation Army. And the faith piece comes along with that. And of course, faith comes to a point where a personal decision is required. And so, you know, how do you marry the program with the notion of faith? You know, at 14, at 15, when is it happening for you? You know,
I mean, you see the first notion there in that first link back when you become a junior soldier. But whether at 7 years old you fully understand
Right.
what you're getting into and what you're saying you believe, that's almost a conversation for another day. But when you get to that 14, 15, 16 years old age, when you're able to become a senior soldier, you look back at the programs that you were in and you say, you know what, this is what I was taught. These are the spiritual teachings that I was taught. These are the biblical teachings that were told to me. And this is what I believe. And you sit back and you say, you know what, is this what I believe? And whether that comes at 14, whether that comes at 18, whether that comes at 22, whether that comes late in life.
It's a process.
It is. It's definitely a process where I would say that a lot of people sometimes jump into it because of reasons that aren't their own. Whether it be mom wanted me to do it, dad wanted me to do it. Oh, I didn't want to make the grandparents feel bad.
And as a little child, you can appreciate that.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
Because your family wants the best for you.
Yes, but there does come a point when, in the back of your head, there's this like, what am I doing here? What's this all about? What does this mean for me? And it does require, at some point, a conscious personal choice and decision.
That first came for me at 14.
Yep.
Actually, I would say that came to me the night before I was enrolled as a senior soldier. I did all of my prep classes. And that night, I couldn't sleep. It was going into Easter Sunday, and I couldn't sleep. And I just had this pit in my stomach the whole night. And it was a time where I said, you know what, I'm looking at what I've been taught. I'm looking at what I've learned. And I'm looking at what I believe in. At 14 years old, that's pretty daunting.
That's heavy.
And I woke up the next morning getting ready to be enrolled as a senior soldier. And I found out the news that my only uncle had passed away from his third battle with prostate cancer. And I came up here that morning with my mother and my father. And my father was having a very tough time. I mean, he's someone who hasn't been out to church for many, many years. And being raised in that family where, your mother's here every Sunday and your father is supporting you and telling you to go, but not going himself. It was a very interesting moment and a very emotional moment where we came up here and we walked into Major Brian Wheeler's office, and I was holding it together. My mother was just grinning from ear to ear. She was so happy that I had made this decision. And then my father, who I know has struggled in some points in his life with his faith, seeing him become so emotionally vulnerable, I said, you know what, I'm here. This is why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because this is what I believe in, and I'm doing this for my family, who it's what they believe in too. And in that moment when we walked into Major Brian Wheeler's office, and it was such an emotionally raw moment and a spiritual moment that I can honestly say I don't think I've had with my family before that. And this is a side of me that I don't talk about a whole lot. It's a side that usually it's like, oh yeah, that's my mom, that's my dad, and I move on to the next subject. I'm involved in so much. I do a lot here at the Corps, and people would think in other things that I'm involved in that I'm a very public person, but at the same time, I'm not. And having these spiritual moments are things often that I keep to myself when it's that close to me. But in that development with the programming, you say, it had a lot of support at home, a lot of support from leaders here at the Corps, and from just my peers here at the Corps.
Good.
And that was what came to that decision at 14. To say that I haven't questioned that decision since would be a bull-faced lie. Right. Whether I would say that, whether I was 18, 20, or now at 22, days go by, not a day goes by, I should say, where you're not thinking about it. It's like you see something, and in the world that we live in today, you see something, and then you just start thinking, and your mind starts racing, you start questioning things. And it's not a great feeling, but it's a feeling that you have to go back at with, you know what do I believe in? What are my values here? What are my beliefs? And I would say that my beliefs are what have gotten me through a lot of those questions.
Absolutely. Let's go to something that I know you really enjoy, and that's Salvation Army banding. You're a bit of a self-proclaimed band geek. All things band, bring it on, right? Let me ask you this question. Besides the playing and the mechanics, what is it about Salvation Army brass music that reaches into your soul and grabs you?
The ability to minister without words.
You want to elaborate on that?
So there's nothing I love more than going caroling at Christmas, playing on the kettle, or downtown on a street corner some wintry night. And just the ability to have an impact on people's lives just through the music and just the very presence of a Salvation Army band. Having that impact on someone's life without even having to say a word it's pretty profound. And I go out knowing that when we're playing in a band, in that public setting, that people are very happy and people are possibly have a renewed sense of faith because of it. It's a profound feeling that I don't think has been matched anywhere else in my life. And I've had people come up to me or the group of us that have been playing and say, you know what, every year I look forward to hearing the Salvation Army band. I look forward to this at Christmas. I look forward to hearing anything in the open air because whether it reminds them of their family, whether it reminds them of days gone by when they would go to church themselves. I remember at the kettle this past year, myself and two other members of the corps stood on the kettle at Sobeys, and we brought our instruments. And there was one person had come up to me after saying that her father went to the old Springdale Street Corps. And this was an older person saying that her father went to the old Springdale Street Corps. And that when he passed, she hasn't been to church since. And we invited her out. I said, I shouldn't say we because I did have that conversation off to the side. So you know what, you should come out. And I didn't tell anyone this, and I didn't mention anything to the majors. She was sitting in the back pew that Sunday morning.
Good.
That's why I love band.
Is there a particular band piece? I know there are thousands, but is there a particular one that says something to you and is meaning to you?
Yeah, Craig Woodland's Grace Alone.
Grace Alone.
Yeah.
Oh, Craig Woodland, let's just have an interjection here. Craig Woodland is a product of St. John's Citadel. He now is the songster leader at London Citadel in Ontario. He's a professional music teacher. He's a composer of some significant merit in the Salvation Army world. Okay, that's Craig Woodland. Tell us about Grace Alone.
Craig Woodland's Grace Alone. It's, to me, the music, whether you take it from a scoring aspect and look at how it's written, or whether you take the technicality of that piece and all the emotions that the music bring and then put it on the words of the piece, Grace Alone, which God provides, it's just such a beautiful piece that sometimes, if our band plays it, if I'm sitting there with my trombone up playing that piece, I'm holding back tears that whole time. And I had the opportunity, thanks to one of our former bandmasters, Don Langdon, to actually get up and conduct that piece one Sunday morning. And it was the last piece that my grandmother got to see me conduct. And it was a big thing for me to be able to do that. And I'm forever grateful to Don for that opportunity. And I knew that my grandmother loved every bit of the Salvation Army band. I mean, when she passed, her recession at the funeral was Montreal Citadel, a very, very prominent Salvation Army banding march. And she loved the band, and she loved seeing me in the band. And that piece, I think, it just getting up there and conducting that piece and being able to pull that emotion from the band. You know yourself, as a former bandmaster yourself, pulling the emotion from the band. I was in this moment, and you talk about these spiritual moments earlier. That was one for me.
And so, just that affirmation of the last line of that prose that goes with that music, we will go forth in grace alone. You may have already referenced this, but let me make it a specific point. Mm-hmm. Is there a person or an event or some happening or time when you became acutely aware that faith needed to be a consistent part of your living going forward?
There are many people, and 3 very close people who I think of that come to mind have all passed on, have all been promoted to glory. And it's 2 of my former bandmates, Lloyd Cooper, Doug Osmond Sr., but my grandmother. She was a woman of faith. She was a woman who put service before self. When you said, in the Salvation Army, William Booth's phrase, heart to God and hand to man, that was my grandmother. And it wasn't so much the so-called Bible thumping or constant reminders, always pray, read your Bible, you got to go to church. It wasn't that. It was in the actions. It was, actions speak louder than words, and for her that rang very, very true. And in her life, the number of meals that she cooked for people, the number of people who she helped counsel, the number of people who she had an impact on, it's something that I can only strive to be. It's someone who I can only strive to be like. And someone who continuously had her faith at the front and center of quite literally everything she did.
Quite an influence.
It's quite an influence that, I know I have people come up to me and tell me stories about her that I didn't even know, and I got 20 years with her. And I vividly remember stories told by even younger members of this corps compared to her, people like Heidi Adams. The impact that she has had on people, not because of the
still quiet
exactly.
influence.
It's the service. It's the always being there. It's the always. I struggle to put it to words sometimes.
Yeah.
And
you're very fortunate to have had that.
Very much so.
Very fortunate.
And unfortunately, I only got 9 years with my grandfather, who passed away back in 2009. Yeah. And the stories I hear about him, the 2 of them were a perfect match in that regard.
Oh, there you go.
Two people whose marriage, whose lives were so spiritually encased, and they were just enveloped in this faith and this belief that they had. And as I said, I struggle to put it to words sometimes, but yep, that's my answer.
Good. And just to wrap this up, Nick, you're taking a step forward into a whole new phase of your life. And so you're on the threshold of a very promising future. What does faith do for you now? We've talked about 14-year-old faith. We've talked about 7-year-old faith. Now there's a 22-year-old faith about ready to take a step out into the great unknown, right? What role is faith playing in your life now?
It gives me the ability to accept that things are going as they are supposed to. The future for anyone can be very daunting, and not knowing what's ahead is sometimes very difficult. And when you're faced with a challenge, being able, instead of always going into this state of panic because you may feel alone, it's knowing that you have someone there. It's knowing that the future is planned, and that, you know, everything is laid out for you, and things happen the way that they're supposed to. That's something that I live my life by. Everything is meant to happen for a reason. We may not know the reason for a very long time. We may know the reason right away. We may never know the reason. Everything happens for a reason, and having the knowledge and faith that I was raised with and that I have now makes the future look a little less scary, and knowing that what lies ahead and beyond is exciting.
Thank you very much for sitting with me today and sharing some of your innermost thoughts on the matter of faith. I look forward to the future of the many, many other intersections that are going to be a part of your life. Thanks very much.
Thank you.